We're joined by a very special guest bouncing back from the bye week as we give you an early preview of Texas A&M. Andrew Stefaniak joins us. How'd I do, Andrew, on that name?
The first time you missed it. That time you got it. So
Andrew Stefaniak. Look at him. All right, here we go. So where all can people follow your work, Andrew? We appreciate the time.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate y'all having me. You can head on over to Locked On Aggies. Those of you Tennessee fans wanting to know more about this matchup, I know we're going to discuss it right now, but if you want to hear my side of a more in-depth into this matchup, Locked On Aggies on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Perfect. Come into the season, Jimbo Fisher makes a change with Bobby Petrino as an offensive coordinator. I thought that would bring some semblance of order to the Aggies offense. I don't know that it's a wow hire like some of the other offensive innovators in college football, but I thought it was a solid hire. What did most Aggie fans think coming into the season?
A lot of people seeing what Coach Fisher's offense had done last year, a lot of people had the mentality of, hey, any upgrade, any new coach is an upgrade, really, to what we saw last year from Coach Fisher's offense. Of course, the Aggies go 5-7, have a painfully awful year. Coach Petrino comes in, and Aggie fans are hopeful that a guy who, there's obviously some off-the-field stuff going on with him and all that, but at the end of the day, he is a great college football offensive mind who is, won at a high level, put together some good offenses at a high level. So Aggie fans were excited and still are with what he's done thus far.
Andrew, all we hear with Texas A&M on a weekly basis, I'm sure you hear, is that pesky buyout. and everybody's frustrated about it. So putting that aside, and when they think they won't be able to pay that buyout, look, I'm with you. I think the offense is looking much better now. I also think, I personally think Max Johnson was better than the quarterback y'all had before. He looks really accurate when he's throwing the ball. Given Jimbo Fisher's in-game mistakes that cost y'all a legitimate shot to beat Alabama on Saturday, could you see a offensive coordinator replacing the head coach as the head coach in a couple of years?
It's a conversation that it's going to build more steam. And when you're Texas A&M, you have to go to Knoxville, take on the Volunteers. You still got to go to Baton Rouge. You still got to go to Oxford and take on Ole Miss. You got 3 ranked road games left on this schedule. You already have losses to Miami and Alabama. If losses start to stack on top of one another, it's going to heat up more and more. I am personally in the camp of Texas A&M's schedule next year is frankly a pretty manageable schedule. You have a lot of that young talent from that 2022 class that is kind of developing this year, and we've seen it take a big step in the right direction. So I'm kind of in the camp of, hey, next year's the year. We don't want to get rid of Coach Fisher right now, because if you get rid of him, you're going to have people transfer out. You have a top 3 recruiting class right now that people are going to decommit. I think that down the road, if things don't get better, yes. But I'm in the camp that I think you want to stick with Jimbo for the time being, because that buyouts, I mean, it's around $80 million. I mean, it's a lot of money. So, but Coach Petrino, it's a good point. It's something that could happen down the road.
Yeah, it is a lot of money. And it seems like Jimbo Fisher, and Tennessee's had a coach that did this, likes to prop up the recruiting talk and the rankings as reasons that he's doing a good job. Does that ever wear thin with A&M fans before we kind of get to some X's and O's breakdown?
I think people are getting there. You look at what he's done recruiting-wise these last 3-4 cycles, incredible classes full of so much talent. And what has it really turned into? A couple could be. And people might say, well, you're in the SEC. You're playing the Bamas and you're playing the Georgias and these top-tier programs every year and competing for SEC championships with these teams. But at the end of the day, if you look at blue chip ratio, Texas A&M has one of the best rosters in college football, up there with the Ohio States and Georgias and Alabamas of the world, and they're not beating them. They've beaten Alabama, but this is a game. Alabama tried to hand you the game on Saturday, and you didn't take it from them. So I think people are getting there to that frustration level, like you said, of, hey, we have all this talent. when are we going to see it turn into an SEC West championship or an SEC championship game appearance? And that stuff just hasn't panned out yet. And if people are beginning to get frustrated, which I think is fair, because with all this talent, you should be putting better results on the field than we've seen during Coach Fisher's tenure in College Station.
Yeah, let's all do like an informal vote real quick. From 1 to 85, who has the most talented roster, Tennessee or Texas A&M?
I'm going to have to lean Texas A&M there personally.
I probably would too. Caleb, how about you?
I don't even think it's close. It's Texas A&M.
Yeah.
It's easily Texas A&M.
I think so, despite the fact that Tennessee's had some guys come along that have been pretty good, especially in their defensive front seven. I agree. Now, the flip side, Tennessee's run the football, but they've done it against Virginia and South Carolina and to some extent Florida, teams that weren't very good at stopping the run. That's not the case with A&M. How stout are they up front and stopping the run? I think they're 8th best rush defense in the nation.
Well, what's so funny about that is heading into this season, that was the concern. How are we going to stop the run? The Texas A&M defense was bleeding yards on the ground last year. That was the concern. We get into this season, and they've been great. They've stopped the run at a high level. This front seven's done a good job to where something that I didn't think would be an issue has been an issue, and that's been more of the passing attack. I'm sure we'll get into that. But stopping the run, the Aggies have done a good job. They've got a lot of talent on that defensive line, a lot of talent in the linebacker room as well. So stopping the run, it was a concern heading into the year, but they've done a good job handling that well so far to where it's not easy to run the football on the Aggies.
Yeah, I want to touch into that because I would ask if you guys were going to be tested against Tennessee's run game, but y'all were tested but they were tested last week, and they held Alabama to 23 yards on 26 carries. Now, yeah, there were some sacks in there and things like that, which Jalen Milroe wasn't that effective running the ball. But curiously, I mean, Jalen Milroe did have his best game passing last week. Joe Milton has struggled through the year to this point. Is there a concern at Texas A&M with the pass defense against, I mean, I have to say it, below average passers?
Big time. Going into last week's game, that was my big key, was keep Milroe in the pocket, make him beat you with your arm. If he does, tip your cap. And what did he do? He beats you with his arm, tip your cap. The game plan wasn't frustrating to me. What was frustrating was how Jermaine Burton and some of these Alabama wide receivers, and I said this on my show, I said, listen, Jalen Waddle and some of these receivers aren't on this Alabama team. No knock to Jermaine Burton and Isaiah Bond and some of these other players, but this is not the Alabama receiver core of old, and they burned Texas A&M secondary all day long. So that was frustrating, and it's definitely a concern. The two games that you have lost have been Miami, where Tyler Van Dyke throws for about 750,000 yards, and then the Jalen Milroe, a guy who I didn't think was going to do much with his arm, does the best he does through the air all year long, probably in his entire college football career. So the pass defense is a concern, and a lot of it's going to come down to, can you get pressure? But looking at Tennessee and what they've done so far this year, the offensive line has done a pretty good job keeping people out of Milton's face, to what I've seen.
No, they have. Yeah. And I'm curious, you talked about Jalen Milroe. I'm sorry to interrupt, Caleb.
That's fine.
You talk about Jalen Milroe, don't let him run and beat you. It's kind of the exact opposite with, well, I don't know this exact opposite. Milroe's a better runner than Joe Milton. How do you think that the Aggies defend Joe Milton, who can run the football, but he's not a natural runner like Jalen Milroe? And maybe you want him in the pocket because he's got accuracy issues at times. So, Andrew, how do you think the Aggies defend him?
Well, first of all, he has a literal cannon for an arm. I mean, it's really impressive watching Milton throw the football. It's truly. But the game plan, I think, for him has got to be, like you said, I've watched him. I've scouted Tennessee a little bit this week. I've been watching some replays, watching the games, and you're right. The accuracy for Milton hasn't been what I was kind of anticipating. I was high on Milton going into this year. And so far, I don't think he has lived up to the preseason hype expectations that really everybody's had for him. And I think that the way you got to beat him is you do have to get pressure on him. and force him. You got to keep him in the pocket. Like you said, let him make bad decisions, let him make poor throws, but you got to get pressure. That's the key, because I frankly don't believe in this Texas A&M secondary to stay with these receivers that long if you can't get pressure. If the Tennessee offensive line gives Milton time, I think this could be a game. This could be a shootout in Tennessee. I'm going to kind of lead toward Tennessee in this matchup. If they're able to get pressure on Milton, I think that's when he might make a mistake. He might turn the football over. So that's going to be the key is keeping him in the pocket. Let the accuracy issues work themselves out and get after him. Hope he makes some mistakes. I think that's going to be how you have to play Milton.
Caleb, doesn't that sound pretty familiar? Like on Tennessee, their defense, if they get pressure, they're good. If you go against their secondary, you're probably going to win. Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, but that hasn't been the case for Tennessee this year. And that's been kind of the underrated part that I've been talking about. If you saw Tennessee against South Carolina, their secondary actually played very well. I want to flip the side because I want to flip to that side because I want to talk about Texas A&M's offense. I think, Andrew, was this due to lack of play calling or poor play calling, or are there issues up front? Because Texas A&M had about 2 or 3 times last game. There was a 4th and 1 early in the game and a second and goal from the 2 late in the game. And in both instances, they got pushed back. They got stopped on the 4th and 1. Are there short yardage run blocking issues right now with this offensive line?
I think that there are all kinds of everything issues with this offensive line. Short yardage running is one of them, like you said. Flat out being able to stop the pass attack from other teams or the pass rush from other teams. Max Johnson, Texas A&M quarterback, was on his back the entire game. I mean, he was looking at the sky the whole game. They were in his face. Even when he made some good throws and made some good decisions, he was getting hit. So this offensive line, like you said, they weren't getting any push on some short yardage situations, and they aren't giving Max Johnson time. It's definitely a concern. And it's funny because going into this game, I don't think I was stoked by the offensive line and their play, but it wasn't like a clear flashing red light concern. And so this was the game where, now it's Alabama. Obviously, it's a different animal from some other opponents, but they got pressure on Max Johnson the whole game, and the Texas A&M offensive line really couldn't do anything. You have a right tackle. You have a freshman, Chase Basantis, a true freshman, and he had his worst game. He graded out on PFF at 17. I don't think I have ever seen that. Never seen that in my life. Yeah. So the offensive line is struggled, and I'm going to be brutally honest with you. This is one of those games where when Max Johnson sits back to throw the football, I'm just going to close my eyes and cross the fingers and hope that I open them and somebody's caught the football and he's not looking at the sky.
Yeah, there are 2 stats I would look at, and that's Texas A&M is allowing about 4.5 tackles for a loss per game and 2 sacks per game. So to me, it seems incumbent, and for those that are just joining us, Andrew Stefaniak covers Texas A&M for Locked on Aggies. It seems like Tennessee's got to get pressure with their front 7, because I don't know that Max Johnson's great, but I think he's good enough to beat an average secondary. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a fair assessment of Max Johnson. The one thing, Caleb, I'm a little bit going to disagree with you on the Connor Wigman to Max Johnson. That was the starter that went down. I think that we have seen a bit of a dip in that Alabama game. I'll be really honest with you, and we can make these statements as much as we want. I think they win that game on Saturday against Alabama with Connor Wigman in there. He flashed a lot, so you lose him, it's a big deal. Max Johnson, though, is a capable backup that you don't really see that often in the SEC. I mean, a true capable backup that can come in and win football games. So, yeah, he can pick a secondary apart if he's given time, but that's what it's going to come down to. If Tennessee's living in the backfield, he'll make bad decisions. If he's got time, I think that he'll pick the secondary apart a little bit, mostly thanks to the talented receivers the Aggies have.
Yep. Andrew, good stuff. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, I just last wanted to say, what about, okay, so we talk about front 7. Does it need to be the front 7 or the front 4? Because Max Johnson looks like a pretty smart quarterback, and I feel like if you bring a lot of people, he picks up blitzes pretty quickly. So you got to get pressure with him with your front 4, don't you?
Yes, I agree with you on that. I think that he's a veteran, played at LSU, played a lot of SEC football games. He can pick up blitzes. It's a great point. So yes, if your front 4 can dominate the Texas A&M offensive line and you can get pressure just with them, then you're going to really succeed in stopping this Texas A&M offense. If the Texas A&M offensive line is able to stop that front four, that's when Max Johnson might be able to pick you apart a bit. So that'll be to me, the trenches is going to be the key to this football game, both sides of the ball for both teams.
Great stuff, Andrew. Again, how do we follow your work?
Yeah, everybody that's tuned in here, you can head over to Locked On Aggies. I will be breaking down this game all week. So if you want to hear more in depth into the Texas A&M perspective, head on over and check it out. I appreciate it.
I thought you may have hinted earlier that you were leaning towards picking Tennessee. Is that the case, or do you know yet? I don't want to make you.
No, yeah, you can. It's fair. I lean toward Tennessee winning this football game, but I do think Tennessee fans need to look at this Texas A&M team and say, hey, this is not your normal 4-2 unranked team. This is a good football team that I think has shot themselves in the foot at times, and at any point can kind of pop off and surprise you. So I lean toward the Vols winning this game, but I do think, Vol fans need to know this is a football team that if they play well, they can beat anybody in college football.
Oh, here's a good question for the message board. I'm going to keep you just a little bit longer, Andrew, if you don't care. Who has a better game, Milton or Johnson? Let me ask you that, Caleb, first, and then I'll ask Andrew.
Well, one thing I'll say, Tennessee fans that are in here, I'll tell you this right now. Neyland, I have never been. I got to get down there. I've been to a basketball game in Knoxville. I haven't been to a football game. The atmosphere in Neyland is the best, I think, in the SEC, arguably college football. I mean, it's insane. So, and that leans into my take here. I just think the home field advantage could be too much in this game. I think Milton's going to have a good football game. I think I lean toward Milton having a better game than Max Johnson in this game.
All right, Caleb.
It's so early in the week. I don't know because it depends on how healthy Joe Milton is. But right now, I lean towards that too, largely because of what we just talked about. Tennessee, as Andrew probably knows, has a very, very good pass rush that has shown itself throughout the year. And so if Texas A&M has what you're talking about, issues at offensive tackle, well, Spencer Rattler paid for that badly with no help at offensive tackle when he was facing Tennessee. So I could see Max Johnson paying for it too.
Yeah, great stuff, Andrew. Really appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and if when you get up to Neyland, let me know. I'll take care of you with some ribs or something like that.
All right, sounds good. Appreciate y'all.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that, Andrew Stefaniak, and he is with a Locked On Aggies. So check him out. He was at SEC Media Day, so it was great to get him on, get a preview of Texas A&M. So that I hate when records are attached to quarterbacks like it's a statistic. But if you had to go into this game with Joe Milton or Max Johnson, who are you going into this game with?
Max Johnson. I'm not even thinking. I'm going into this game with Max Johnson. Now, I think Joe Milton will have a better game, but that's because of moving parts around them. But I'd go into the game with Max Johnson. I saw enough to say Max Johnson's an accurate thrower. I'm a fan.
Okay, let's take a look at the rating for a second. Okay, so you have Max Johnson at 8 with 150.95 rating. That's 8th in the SEC. Joe Milton is 10th. So you say it like it's a slam dunk. That's a little bit closer. They're about 10 points apart on quarterback rankings.
Compare their competition so far to this point. That's actually embarrassing that Joe Milton isn't beating him handily.
Fair. The Cooper Mays absence big factor. I think that's a huge factor. I think this is a different, and I'm not saying this because we do the Vol report with Coop. I think that's a huge monster factor. I don't think they lose to Florida if Cooper's in the game.
Joe Milton's second worst QBR and worst quarterback reading of the year were against South Carolina with Cooper Mays back in the game.
Okay.
So again, that South Carolina game, people thought got a little higher on him. I got lower on him after that. Now he was playing with a knee brace or a leg brace. Now that may have impacted a lot of what he was doing, but I thought he played very poorly in that game.